Hello, and welcome to Group 16's presentation of a visual exploration of labor force participation by demographic groups, with a focus on underrepresented populations. We'll be doing a visual analysis of employment trends through both recession and pandemic, and using data visualization, we'll analyze workforce labor participation rates among various demographic groups over time. We'll pay particular attention to times of recession, such as the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic of primarily 2020 through 2021. The team members in Group 16 are Renu Jaiswal, Vaibhav Lodhia, and Doug Perez. The question we wanted to ask or answer is how have overall employment trends affected underrepresented groups in the labor force? We aim to, using historical data, visualize trends in the overall labor force. And then we'll compare various demographic groups, such as men versus women and ethnic groups, to the overall workforce participation rate over time. The question we seek to answer is, do recession and pandemic impact workforce participation among some of the demographic groups more than others? Our data sources come primarily from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. This was a font of information that included things about the overall employment rate, the unemployment rate, conversely, how many working age members of the population participated or were actively seeking employment, how many jobs were created or lost in the economy, and then, of course, employment by sector. Other data sets we use include from the U.S. Department of Labor. These include the participation rate by sex, race, and Hispanic identity, and other demographic factors such as age, education, marital status, or parental status. Finally, the World Bank labor workforce participation data set gives a global perspective by percent of population, with a special focus on the female participation. Additional data in the World Bank set includes the year, economy mode, and GDP. Now, in this graph, we see the U.S. total workforce participation percentage by year. Now, this covers a period of 2008 through 2022. And so periods we do see highlighted are the economic downturn of 2008 and 2009, and the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 through 2022. As we can see, both events caused a dip in the overall workforce participation rate. However, the way they did so was starkly different. With the 2008 financial crisis, we see a steady downward trend in the labor participation rate that lasts the entire 2 years. So beginning from January 2008, where we have a workforce participation rate in the mid 60% range, you see it is below 60% by December of 2009, with a steady decrease month over month over the 2 year period. That's compared to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we went from, well, let's say the low 60s of participation rate to a sudden drop into the low 50s, a drop of approximately 10%. But meanwhile, the recovery in the labor participation rate for COVID-19 happened much more quickly, with a return to just below 60% participation at the end of the 2 years. Further, we see that the workforce participation by industry changed during this period of time as well. In this tree map, we see a composition of the entire labor force by industry and how it has changed since or between 2012 and 2022. The darker the green in this tree map, the faster the rate of increase in the proportion of the job market for that industry. And it's easy to quickly visualize that two industries that stand out are the transportation and warehousing industry and the construction industry. While relatively small in proportion to the rest of the industries in the labor workforce. The dark green indicates that these sectors are growing more quickly than in other sectors. This is especially visible if we use something like a waterfall visualization, where we can see that the industries with the largest gains are indeed transportation and warehousing and construction, followed closely by professional and business services. Now, the industries that have suffered the largest declines also stand out using this waterfall map. Those would be mining, as well as agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting for the self employed. Those industries are in decline, perhaps as a result of trends that changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw a move from smaller businesses to conglomerates and an emphasis on the need for transportation and warehousing as well as construction services.
In this bar chart, we are comparing the labor force participation rates by gender, race, and ethnicity for 2020 and the projected rates for 2029. Notice the blue bars show the actual rates in 2020 and the orange bars indicate projections for 2029. A quick glance reveals a couple of key insights. Participation rates for men are higher than for women in 2020, but by 2029 we expect to see significant increase, particularly among women in all other ethnic groups. Interestingly, there is a projected slight decline for white men. These trends suggest a shifting landscape in the labor market with potential implications for policy and economic growth. In this stacked bar chart, we see the labor force participation rates of women in 2020 broken down by age and ethnicity. It is a rich tapestry showing that participation is not uniform across the board. For example, Black and Hispanic women have higher participation rates in certain age groups compared to their white and Asian counterparts. This data is crucial for tailoring policies towards areas where participation is lower. In this visualization, we delve into the labor force participation of women by age group with a clear color code for each ethnicity. The peak participation is seen in the prime working ages of 25 to 54, but there is a notable persistence in labor engagement among Hispanic women well into the older age groups, raising questions about economic necessity versus choice. This graph displays labor force participation by educational attainment comparing men and women in 2020. There is a steady climb in participation as education levels rise, with men leading slightly at every educational tier. It underscores the importance of education as a key factor in workforce engagement. In this comparative bar chart, we observe both the current and projected labor force participation rates by age and sex. While the rates for the younger age groups remain relatively stable, there is an expected decline in older groups. The gender gap in participation is projected to narrow, especially in the 35 to 44 age bracket. This line chart tracks unemployment rates over time by ethnicity. Notice the spikes corresponding to economic downturns, with Black or African American individuals often experiencing higher rates of unemployment. The recent convergence of all lines suggests a narrowing ethnic gap in unemployment, likely influenced by the current economic climate.
The first graph we have plotted here is the line plot for COVID cases over time with rolling average. This compelling line plot illustrates the trajectory of COVID cases over time. The blue line represents the daily reported cases, providing a clear picture of the fluctuations in infection rates. Meanwhile, the red dash line showcases the 7-day rolling average, smoothing out the data and revealing underlying trends. This visual representation is crucial for understanding the progression of the pandemic and identifying potential patterns. The line plot was chosen to visualize the temporal evolution of COVID cases over time. It provides a clear representation of daily reported cases, allowing us to observe the trends and fluctuations in unemployment. Moving on to figure 2, this is a heat map of correlation between women, men, and black unemployment rates and the COVID cases. This figure introduces a heat map that eliminates the correlation between COVID cases and specific demographic groups like women, men, black individuals, and white individuals. The color intensity signifies the strength and the direction of the correlation, with warmer colors indicating a positive correlation and a cooler color representing a negative correlation. Here we choose heat map because heat maps are effective for displaying correlation matrices, enabling us to quickly identify patterns and relationships between each of the variables. The next graph is a violin plot for the distribution of unemployment rates across age groups. Here we delve into the distribution of unemployment rates across different age groups relative to the total number of COVID cases. The violin plot vividly displays spread of unemployment rate of age groups like 16 to 24, 25 to 54, 55 to 64, and 65 plus. Each violin shape encapsulates the probability density of unemployment rates, providing unique perspective on how these rates vary across age demographics. We used violin plot in particular because it is effective in conveying the spread of data by giving us insights into the variability of unemployment rate within each age cohort. It's a suitable choice when we deal with multiple categories and provide a comprehensive view of how unemployment rates vary across each different age group. As we move forward, the next plot is a box plot for women, men, and black unemployment rate relative to the COVID cases. Here in this figure, the box plot highlights that the normalized unemployment rates for men, women, and black individuals in relation to the total number of COVID cases. The boxes provide a visual summary of distribution showcasing the median, quartile, and potential outliers. This visualization allows us to compare central tendency and variability of unemployment rate among different demographic groups. We used box plot here because they are excellent for comparing the central tendency and the variability of data among different groups. They provide a concise summary of distribution, making it easy to identify each of the median values, quartiles, and potential outliers. Let's explore another insightful visualization. The violin plot in this figure illustrates the normalized unemployment rates for women, men, and white individuals. The shape of each violin conveys the distribution of unemployment rates, offering nuanced perspective on how these rates vary within each demographic category. Here the violin plots were used because violin plots are particularly effective when comparing distribution between multiple groups and offering insight into the shape to spread out the data within each demographic category.